stuff like Anthrax didn't bring the noise with Public Enemy, but it would have been early 90s definitely, where the soundtrack for Judgment Night movie with Emilio Estevez and Cuba Gooding Jr. in it and Dennis Leary, great movie, but where they brought together metal bands, and there was a lot of alternative metal bands or alternative rock bands with rap artists. So like Sonic Youth did a thing with Cypress Hill, Helmet did it with House of Pain, Fate No More with Booyah Tribe. I could keep going on and on and on.
Yes,
and you also had bands like Biohazard were around as well, which would have been, I suppose, seen as a hardcore band, but they had rap elements in it because it sounded like rap because they were shouting, but they did stuff with Onyx on that as well. There was something kind of really gritty and kind of honest about it all as well. Where it came, Biohazard, another fantastic band. There's certain kind of like corny elements to it. I think if you're looking back on it, like, I mean, it's like from 20 years ago, it's very weird. Like,
exactly.
It was up, but like songs like What Makes Us Tick, State of the World Address, motherfucker. There's like great things going on there with it, but all these kind of things came together when people were a bit fed up with grunge music, and I suppose they were kind of like, you had people that they had like, they're after getting a taste of the alternative thing and a taste of some of the extreme stuff through Pantera and all that, and they wanted something there, and it came together with new metal, and like we've done like a whole history of new metal thing as well, so I'm not going to get into like everything with it, but definitely I suppose like people who look at Korn, well, the first time I heard Korn, I would have been like, new metal I suppose was kind of maybe 2 years after all these bands were around, but like Korn were like played on the extreme metal part of Headbangers Ball the last 20 minutes or half an hour, but I remember seeing it and I was like, who the fuck are these guys in Adidas fucking tracksuits?
Yes, exactly.
Fucking playing this stuff.
Skedaddling like a Tasmanian devil.
Yeah,
what the
and
fuck?
with the dreadlocks as well, because it sounds really weird, but it was, I went through a phase where to get away from the hair metal thing, a lot of people in the 90s there had like, with metal, it was short hair was the thing. Metallica even did it with
and got shot on from behind.
with load and really, but it was like so out of fucking, a lot of the death metal guys kept the hair, and black metal guys obviously as well, but others they were like no, it's kind of so it's like seeing with dreadlocks, I was like, what the fuck, it's just
dreadlocks of all things.
It's hard to kind of say how kind of like weird, bizarre, it kind of all looked, but there was something
especially with the tracksuit ends as well then, or a kilt as well, even more bizarre.
That kind of came later, but even like with the fucking the bagpipes on the album, I remember I really struggled to get Korn's album, the first one. It was like it took a while for Korn to kind of blow up and become who they ended up becoming, but it's fucking like, I remember getting that album and I was just like, Jesus fucking Christ, I'd never heard anything like it, because they did go, it was rhythmic, just so percussive, and like the heaviness, like everything just dropped down. It had the, I suppose, melodic elements of extreme, or melodic kind of like elements mixed with extreme music. And as well, he wasn't rapping. People always go, oh, Korn rapping. He was kind of like scatting, I suppose. It's some kind of thing. It was kind of bizarre. But I didn't realise as well, Disturbed were about, I fucking hate Disturbed with a passion. But I saw a thing with David Draymond where he was like, well, people say that I used to rap, but I was just influenced by reggae. And all of a sudden I went, oh my God.
That's exactly what it is. It's reggae. It's rap, reggae, metal.
But I never kind of thought it. But thing as well, at the same time as Korn, you had the Deftones that were on, and the Deftones did have rap in there, so like some of their stuff. But that was where they came from. They just mixed everything that they liked together, and like the Deftones are a pure fusion of everything. I remember it was like Bored was the song that got really big for them, and people were like, oh my God, like this rap kind of band, or kind of like metal, alternative metal band. And then when you listen to the album, it's there's like Driver Number 9? I can't remember the names of some of the songs, but even oh no, God, I can't remember the names. What I need a fucking song. I listened to the album to death, like when I got it.
I find that happens to me a lot though. I'm listening to albums, but I'm not actually looking at the track names, and it's just like, I'm like, oh, song number 3.
But I remember when I got like, I can't even remember the name of the bloody album, but when I got that album,
White Pony, previous one,
no, it's
Around the Fur.
No, it was before Around the Fur. It was the Deftones. I can't remember it. But I listened to that fucking song, fucking death. Honestly, it was just, I just couldn't, or well, that album. I just fucking couldn't stop listening to it at all. But yeah, it was like there was definitely more rap elements, I think, in with the Deftones, but the Deftones were nowhere near as big as Korn ended up becoming with it, and then that kind of laid the groundwork for what would have ended up becoming new metal. And I suppose later on, then kind of like what popularized new metal a lot more was like Limp Bizkit, definitely with their second album. They just exploded. Adrenaline, I knew, fucking Adrenaline. But I was going to say, yeah, on that album, you can hear kind of like things like they always wear their influences on their sleeves, like The Cure, as well as like all these things, as well as heavy metal kind of bands, because it's some of them were into rap, and it was just a good, diverse thing, and that's I think what kind of like really for me categorized new metal. And I kind of like would have put new metal was just a continuation, I think, of the alternative metal scene in the early 90s going into it. But because of the way Limp Bizkit blew up, it became associated with rap metal. And then, like we were talking about, like, with things, it became bloated and like hair metal, and then died a death.
Unfortunately, then never really recovered. It's starting to get a little bit of a revival now, but people still hear the word new metal and kind of go, ugh.
Yeah, and it's mainly because, like, I mean, Slipknot will fucking argue to Slipknot were a new metal band. They were thrown in with the new metal thing when it came out, and that's why I didn't get in Slipknot's album for a good while, because I looked at the cover and it was like, oh, it's another one of these fucking bands with people wearing fucking masks and boiler suits. Yeah. It's like Slipknot were not the first ones to be doing that. There was a lot of bands around at the time. Slipknot just were the best. Yeah. Out of a lot, and they had the musical fucking cojones with it. But they had bands like Linkin Park, who became massive. Yeah, of course. With like they did it well with the mix and the rap, and like me part at the time I hated Linkin Park because
did not enjoy.
I kind of felt like they were after destroying everything. Then Limp Bizkit, I kind of thought killed everything off, even though I kind of like Limp Bizkit underneath, but I didn't like to admit it.
Yeah, that's the thing. They're actually a really good band, but the trouble was they were incredibly mainstream, and at the time I was kind of like, oh my god, everyone and their mother like Linkin Park, and you're just kind of like, well, if everybody likes him, I can't like him because I'm too cool to like him.
And I was like, with some bands, I think the mainstream comes to them, like with Nirvana and some of those bands. But with Limp Bizkit definitely went to the mainstream. Fred Durst just wanted to be famous. He bought into that whole kind of a thing. The difference between the first album with Limp Bizkit and the second album is like earth shattering. And with a third album is actually quite good. The chocolate starfish and the hot dog flavoured water.
Yes. What a fucking name. Jesus Christ. The Linkin Park and Limp Bizkit was just like everybody loved them. And they were super popular. And as I said, they rode the charts for like how long? It was like you couldn't turn on the telly, you couldn't turn on the radio, you couldn't do anything.
Yeah, I think that was well into 2000. So at that stage when it kind of like blew up, it was still very underground, kind of like in the 90s, and very metal kind of a thing. Yeah. And it just ended up fucking same as all these things, kind of like, you know, dying a fucking death. So there was a band that popped into my head there, and they're after just popping out. I know there's
Alien Ant Farm and all of those.
They would
way
have been 2000s,
later in the 2000s. Yeah.
But we'll probably end up touching briefly in the 2000s on new metal again. But and that kind of like was really, I suppose, the 90s.
Or Evanescence, the 90s.
No, they would have been 2000s.
Yeah.
They definitely would have been 2000s. But I suppose as well, kind of like starting off around that time, you had a lot of the power metal scene was starting off as well, which kind of forgetting if Mark was here now, Mark would be able to kind of like talk about.
He would list off every single power metal.
Yeah, but Nightwish and all those, and Lacuna Coil. I never considered Lacuna Coil power metal, but I suppose they kind of are, because I think they're a little bit better than most of the power metal bands. They have a little bit more going on with them. I think with them they're just a bit heavier. Like their cover version of Enjoy the Silence, which was the thing that started happening, I suppose, with new metal, was the whole kind of cover version thing, which we talked about before. Like they picked up on it, was like, it's nearly like the power ballad in the 80s with new metal. It was like, right, we gotta get this cover of an 80s fucking song that was popular. And there was like a lot of punk bands who were doing it as well, where it's like, let's do a punk version of kind of like Aha's Take On Me, and people are kind of go,
it's great. And then we'll buy the album and suddenly we've got a whole new audience.
But I suppose it's the thing, I know kind of like there's been a lot of stuff about Marilyn Manson at the moment, but he's someone who we've actually missed out on in the 90s, and kind of regardless of what's after going on with him, he was someone I think that kind of it's whatever way he positioned himself with Trent Reznor, and a lot of people have talked about how he used people, and he's not really a fucking nice. And Trent Reznor like fucking fell out with him massively. And I remember when was the album that made him really big. Antichrist Superstar was the album that kind of like exploded for Marilyn Manson, and really kind of exploded because it seems to have all been written by Trent Reznor and it was produced by Trent Reznor. And even when they were making the album, I remember kind of like reading in metal magazines or Trent Reznor bitching about him, going, "Oh, the Jesus, it'd be nice if he shut up in the fucking studio for once." And he put it all together and put it out there. And I think he was friends with Manson before, because Manson pops up on Wish. The music video for that, like pre-Marilyn Manson, you see him kind of like no makeup and no fucking milky eye, kind of like Richmond out of The Office, or not The Office, fucking IT crowd. But like Marilyn Manson was fucking he became like a massive superstar in the 90s. I suppose it started off with Sweet Dreams, they did a cover version of that.
Was that early? Jesus Christ.
And that went really, and then kind of like the Antichrist Superstar came out on the back of that with Beautiful People was the thing that fucking
again all over the radio as well.
But it was a thing, like Trent Reznor says about, like, did a song about Manson called Starfuckers. That was Manson, I think, seems to be like Fred Durst, where he wanted to be famous, he wanted to have all these things, so he came from a metal kind of background, or industrial metal background, and kind of tried to wangle through it, and he just seemed to be everywhere in the 90s. He was all, and MTV as well promoted him heavily, like because there was that controversy around him. I seem to remember one of the MTV Music Awards where he played at it. I can't remember if it was one where he tore up a Bible, or there was always stuff like that where he's getting death threats about one thing or another. And then there was, after Antichrist Superstar, was Mechanical Animals was the album, where it was kind of more kind of like glam rock Bowie style thing, and that was just around when before the Columbine massacre happened. And things kind of started going, but not going to get into his personal life or anything like that, because but I think regardless of what the man might have done or may not have done, he's kind of like, well,
there was metal in the 90s.
Yeah, you can't mention metal in the 90s without him. He was like a big figure in it, and then would have, like, I mean, Murder Dolls and all these different bands, and became a thing, people copying Marilyn Manson as well. Whereas, and I suppose Manson to a certain point probably would have taken elements from black metal as well. He just kind of like took bits and pieces from everywhere and put it together, like all these things that were working. Very, very well put in, but I think he's got like a degree in journalism as well, and so for maybe publicity. So it was just like he knew how to handle things, and MTV, massive part of his career.
MTV in general, I suppose, is probably partly responsible for like metal in the 90s in general, because that you could not, like, Headbangers Ball, as you said, Beavis and Butthead, all of that kind of thing, and that probably contributed to why the charismatic frontmen of metal, I suppose, were as charismatic and as big as they were, because they were so bright, so colourful, so people were kind of like nearly screen ready, weren't they? That was kind of like they were kind of like they knew, all right, because like in the 80s I think a lot of people were learning, and it was like, all right, unless you're like massive like Ozzy or something like that, then you're not going to know that you're going to be doing like interviews fucking 24, but people were like, all right, we need to have our demo tapes, we need to do this, we need to put a press pack together, send them all out to these different people. You need to be able to do that. You need to have somebody who's able to carry themselves in an interview. You need to have somebody who's not afraid to speak up and be a little bit witty, a little bit charming in interviews and all this kind of stuff. You can't just get up there and either be a good guitar player or a good singer or whatever. You need to have somebody who can also promote the band a bit and all the rest, but who can interact with the fans.
The 80s, MTV in the 80s would have been massively influential on all these different people, because it's like your MTV, it really went to shit. Like, it properly went to shit in kind of like, the early 2000s, I suppose.
It's not music television anymore at all. It was like My Sweet 16, all that bullshit.
Oh no, even before that, like, because it was like constantly Britney Spears, that kind of thing. It was just like shit pop music. Whereas in the 80s, it was like everything, absolutely everything. Like, I got into rap probably because of Yo MTV Raps. And I started learning about all these different people, which would never have learned about. Like, Irish radio weren't going to be playing fucking
so generic and so like just chart orientation. That was it. Nothing different ever came across the airwaves back then.
But you got to see these people and then kind of like the interviews with them as well, and learn about them, because like there were, maybe I was wrong, but like there wasn't anyway definitely where I was, like rap magazines that you could get or anything. So it was like even Run DMC, like fucking as big as they were. there was nothing about them in Ireland.
No.
And then, like, so I imagine kind of like, not that it would have been similar, but all these different, they would have grown up with MTV, kind of like, you know, looking at rap music, New Romantics, fucking synthesizer music, some industrial music that were coming through, heavy metal and all, and it all blurs together when you're a kid.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, oh, this is...
These are all the things I enjoy, so